Have you experienced encountering difficulty in making the number of items in your teacher-made assessment tool and the number of items in your TOS equal, or even worse, you are not even sure if the level of questioning is actually suited to the framework that you are using? I am Bernadette Acondes, and I'll be talking about ensuring the content and construct validity of assessment through TOS. Generally, this session targets to harmonize and unify the TOS construction in Quezon National High School. Moreover, the following are the session objectives. Number 1, note the common mistakes of test development. Second, revisit different concepts such as TOS, cognitive process dimension, and knowledge dimension. Third, provide overview on LUMP assessment. Fourth, discuss the important guidelines in constructing TOS. And lastly, share the process, results, and output of TOS development, points of improvement, and ways forward. If you experience difficulty in developing teacher-made assessment tools like quarterly examination paper, you might be committing the following common mistakes in test development. First, not specifying the framework or frameworks to be used in test development. Second, neglecting the importance of learning developments, or rather learning objectives, and the most essential learning competencies as well. Constructing the test without the table of specification or TOS, or developing and finalizing the test questions before the development of TOS. If you have committed these mistakes, your assessment will surely be chaotic. With this, we must construct and finalize the TOS before the development of the test items. According to Fives and Barnes, the Table of Specification is a tool used to ensure that a test or assessment measures the content and thinking skills that the test intends to measure. Thus, when used appropriately, it can provide response content and construct validity evidence. The primary purpose of a TOS is to ensure alignment between the items of elements of an assessment and the content, skills, or constructs that the assessment intends to assess. In connection to this, the objectives that we should include in quarterly tests are the ones that can be measured through a pen and paper assessment. In our context in Quezon National High School, or even in the Department of Education as a whole, MELCs give us a broader notion of our aim in teaching specific contents or skills that can be too complex. This is why it is important to specify the enabling objectives as we develop or construct our TOS. The main framework that you can use in TOS construction and test item development is Revised Bloom's Taxonomy. This is congruent to DepEd Order Number 8 Series of 2015, or also known as Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment for K-12 Basic Education Program. And this framework is also in line to the test development for the Learning Assurance for Monitoring and Progress, or LUMP, of DepEd Calabarzon, which was launched in 2021. This framework might sound common and familiar, I know, but many of us tend to overlook the interplay of two dimensions that are vital in the Revised Bloom's Taxonomy, such as cognitive process dimension and knowledge dimension. More elaborated discussion will be given about these two dimensions later on. Let us just have a run through of LUMP, which is the inspiration of our constructed TOS in Quezon National High School. It started in 2021, headed by our former regional director, Wilfredo E. Cabral. This is the basic anatomy of the lump in 2021. So we started with a test construction by using the RBT with the two dimensions, of course, the interplay of the two, such as the cognitive process dimension and knowledge dimension. And for the options, we have different framework, which we call as solo framework. In 2022, aside from the solo framework and RBT, the basic anatomy was improved further by considering other frameworks such as TEAMS and PISA frameworks. Where should we go? What should be our basic plan in quarterly assessment? Well, it should be the following. First, anchoring the TOS in the cornerstone of assessment. Second, construct test items in congruence to the principles and framework of PISA and TEAMS. Third, formulate options by using solo frameworks. And lastly, utilizing the quarterly item analysis in revising and improving the quarterly assessment tools. But if we're going to trace it, where are we now? Actually, we are taking the first step in developing an assessment tool, specifically the quarterly assessment, and that is anchoring the TOS on the cornerstone of assessment. And as we can see it, medyo malayo pa po ang ating lalakbayin when it comes to assessment tool development. So we still have the second, the third, and even the fourth. To review and highlight important concepts, let us have the discussion of RBT, the taxonomy of the TOS. So basically, we're just going to anchor our TOS with the two dimensions of RBT. The revised Bloom's taxonomy is simply an update to the original taxonomy that made expanded on the vision of the original while revising the language and hierarchy of the popular cognitive process dimension. The revised taxonomy is created on a two-dimensional framework to include the cognitive process and knowledge. The cognitive process includes the 6 levels of thinking skills as remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. The knowledge dimension is the core of the 6 cognitive process and is classified into 4 types of knowledge, including factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive knowledge. The interplay between the two must be considered in developing the TOS and test items. Let us have a review of the cognitive process dimension. Actually, this one is more common than the knowledge dimension. We are very much familiar with this, but then let us still have the review of it. The authors of the revised taxonomy underscore this dynamism using verbs and gerunds to label their categories and subcategories rather than the nouns of the original taxonomy. So with that, from knowledge, we do have remember. From comprehension, we have understand. From application, we do have apply. From analysis, we do have analyze. And from synthesis, we do have evaluate. And evaluate in 1956 is the highest level of cognitive process, but then in 2001 with the revised Bloom's taxonomy by Anderson and Krathwohl. Sorry for that typographical error. This is actually 2001 and not 2021. Again, for the lower order thinking skills, it's for the remember, understand, and apply level. And for the HOTS, we do have analyze, evaluate, and create levels. So lower order questions ask students to recall and comprehend material that was previously read or taught by the teacher. On the other hand, when we say higher order questions, these kind of questions ask students to use information previously learned to create or support an answer with logically reasoned evidence. Both higher and lower order questions are useful and have their place in teaching learning process, and not only in this process, but also in assessment as well. This is what we often overlooked in TOS and test construction. We are very well versed, I think, when it comes to the cognitive process dimension from remember to create. But when it comes to this dimension, which is the KD or knowledge dimension, not everybody knows about it. Knowledge dimension is again categorized into four, such as factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. So for the factual, the basic elements students must know to be acquired with a discipline or solve problems in it. And when we say conceptual, the interrelationship among the basic elements with a larger structure that enables them to function together. And third, procedural, it is how to do something or the methods of inquiry and criteria for using skills, algorithms, techniques, and method. And for the metacognitive, which is the highest level of knowledge dimension, it is the knowledge of cognition in general, as well as awareness and knowledge of one's own cognition. Often than not, we only categorize a test item in terms of cognitive process dimension. We distribute items and identify them as remember, understand, apply, analyze, or create. With this, we overlooked the knowledge dimension. We tend to forget to categorize it also as to factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. So the proper way in constructing and categorizing a test item is by considering both dimensions. Hence, a test item could be remember factual, remember conceptual, remember procedural, and remember metacognitive. This is also true or the same in the following levels, such as understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So we could say understand factual level, or apply conceptual level, or evaluate procedural level, or create metacognitive level, and so on and so forth. Here, remember factual is the least student-centered and it is the least authentic one, while create metacognitive level is the most student-centered and the most authentic. Let us take a look at the example. Item number 3 is remember procedural, while item number 23 is create procedural. Item number 3 and item number 23 are both procedural in terms of knowledge dimension, but they are in different levels in terms of cognitive process dimension. So as you can see, once again, number 3 is remember procedural and 23 is create procedural. After the review of the two dimensions, I will share with you a sample of TOS that we can use in Quezon National High School, or maybe I will just attach the soft copy of it so that you can navigate the sample TOS, and also it will serve as the format in constructing our TOS in our school. But before that, let us have a quick discussion of the TOS development process that I have undertaken to ensure the validity of the constructed TOS. Let's start the discussion of the process by having the persons involved. So the TOS constructor or developer is yours truly. Our TOS content validator, which is we considered as the expert in the field, is Dr. Juanito A. Merle. And our consultants and our school consultants are the following. Sir Jesse V. Vasquez, Ma'am Cynthia M. Tadong, and Ma'am Luningning De Villa. Identify if there are weaknesses to improve or to address And also to identify the strength of our TOS, I have conducted the pilot testing, and the following are the pilot testing participants. They are senior high school teachers from Soksai, Filipino, TVL, and English groups. So we do have Sir Raycon C. Candes, Ma'am Jenny Lynn H. Howe, Ma'am Jessica D. Mailig, Ma'am Mardel D. Villalon, Sir Abraham Sanchez, Sir Armando A. Luces Jr., Ma'am Charlene Esmera Rodriguez, Ma'am Teresa Joy Q. Manzano, Sir Roy S. Ricon, Sir Ronald H. Abisamis, Ma'am Bernadette B. Caranto, and of course we do have Sir Carlo Troy Ancelot T. Manalo. Now let us have the overview of the process. First, I have conducted needs assessment. To avoid duplication, I conducted informal survey to determine whether there is existing TOS format in the division and in the region as well. Upon confirming that there is no recommended format in the DO and the RO level, I proceeded to TOS development. I used RBD as the main framework. Then I developed a three-way TOS. Then the TOS was validated in terms of phase and content validity. Dr. Juanito A. Morles served as the content validator. After the validation phase, it was pilot tested. Using convenient sampling, the pilot testing was done by involving senior high school teachers from different subject groups such as English, Filipino, TVL, and Soksai group. Empirical data were collected and the themes were identified. After the pilot testing, minimal revision was done. So allow me to share with you the overview of results. Let us have first the needs assessment. So I already mentioned what I did in this phase. So no, according to my informal interview, there is no recommended TOS format in the division and regional level. And for the phase validation, these are some of the suggestions. First is put legend. They think that it's quite technical, so it's necessary that there is legend below the TOS so that the users can refer to it every time they forget something about the acronym. And second is add rows equivalent to the number of objectives per topic. And lastly, make the subject and grade level more visible. For the content validation, allow me to read Doc Merle's comment. So this is his comment. With reference to the inputs I gained from the regional training on assessment, the subject teacher covered the different salient feature and dimensions in crafting of MD assessment. Tools such as content, MELCs, enabling objectives, cognitive behaviors, time allotment for each MELC, the percentage distribution with reference to time spent in lesson delivery, number of items which are properly classified and distributed, and item placement. I have also noticed that there is an even distribution of items as the hats and lots. What about the use of solo framework and context such as personal, global, etc.? Are you also intending to consider these points? And then he continued by saying, to my own assessment, your TOS is a perfect one which may be adopted by the division if permitted by the owner or designer. Thank you for the opportunity to examine your work. So I think this is a positive response or also a positive result of the content validation conducted by Dr. Juanito A. Merle. For the pilot testing, the qualitative responses of the participants were coded. Allow me to share with you the common themes for strengths and weaknesses. So let's start with the strengths. So it is detail-oriented, ensures validity, ensures congruency to the objectives, anchored on cognitive process and knowledge dimensions, and lastly, promotes standardization. And for the weaknesses, it is time-consuming, unfamiliar acronyms, challenging, and technical. In terms of being time-consuming, I think we cannot do away with the process of TOS development. And when we follow the correct process, or when we actually consider different aspects in developing the TOS, it is always time consuming, but it is actually rewarding, and it allows us to have minimal problem as we construct the test items during our test item construction. So TOS is always one of the most critical and the most important part of any assessment tool development. If we skip this part, everything will be chaotic at the end. And for the unfamiliar acronyms, this can be solved by having some simple orientation about knowledge dimensions. I think that is the root, or that is the reason why it is a bit challenging and technical as well, because we are not actually familiar with these terms before, and we tend to forget, or we tend to overlook to have the interplay of knowledge dimensions and cognitive process dimensions. But with proper orientation, even a simple one, everything will be smooth, everything will be simple, everything will be easy. Because actually this TOS is almost similar to other TOS format. At this juncture, let me share with you the guidelines on TOS construction using the developed TOS format. These are the guidelines that we can follow in TOS construction. First, identify the topics and MELs that must be included in the quarterly assessment. Please remember that there are MELs that are intended for performance only, and there are MELs that are suited for pen and paper assessment. In cases that MELs for performance are so dominant, you may consider enabling objectives that could be applicable for pen and paper assessment. This is the reason why it's very important that we include enabling objectives in our TOS, not only the MELs. And for the second one, include the learning objectives or enabling objectives that are written in LEs and WLPs. So I repeat, any objective that you're going to include in your TOS should be coming from the learning exemplars or the weekly learning plans that you have used in your class, so that everything will be congruent. These will ensure the congruency among the target, which is based on the objectives, implemented instruction, and the quarterly assessment to be crafted. Then identify each objective in terms of the RBT levels, or the cognitive process dimensions. This step is tremendously important to achieve congruency between the levels of objectives and the levels of questioning. Okay, so the next one is the distribution of number of items must be congruent to the RBT levels of the objectives. So in this TOS, we're not going to pre-identify the percentage for each levels. For example, in the old TOS format, we have identified a specific percentage for remember, specific percentage for understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. But actually, we should not do that. It is because the number, or the levels, or the percentage of items to a particular level that belongs to a particular level should be dependent on the levels of the objectives in that particular topic. For example, in topic 1, we do have remember, understand, and apply. So eventually we're gonna spread the items out in terms of the identified levels of the objectives for that particular topic. And Next is in item placement, start with the most basic RBT levels to the most complex. Moreover, indicate the knowledge dimensions in each item number. This will be one of your guides in constructing test items. So I think that is always the name of the game when it comes to assessment. We always start with the simplest one, going to the most complex. So the same in arranging the item number or the item placement in our TOS. As we assign number to the item, it should be the simplest one first, going to a more complicated, more complex, to the most complicated and most complex. And also we do have the next one. Make sure to finalize first the TOS before proceeding to the construction of test items and options. Remember, the common mistake in making or developing test assessment tool is that we proceed in constructing the test items first, finishing everything first before we have our TOS. So that is actually a crime when it comes to assessment tool development. We always start with the TOS, and then after we finalize it and we make sure that everything's okay, everything's perfect, that will be the only time that we have the construction of the test items construction. So when you are in doubt as you construct your TOS, you may consult your master teachers. Point, we are in the last part of the presentation. Just allow me to share with you the points of improvement and some ways forward of this session or this topic. So for the points of improvement, formatting the TOS using Excel for instant computation, because as of now, I have formatted it using MS Word, but I think it will be better if we're going to have that in Excel so that there will be instant computation. Maybe our math teachers can help us in doing this. Okay, for the ways forward, technically we are taking the first step, and we still have the remaining 3 steps, and this will be the focus of our Project Collab 2.0 in senior high school English. So there is a transition from Project Collab 1.0 that we implemented last year that focuses on learning delivery. Now it will be on assessment. Originally, I planned to launch this project last November, but unexpected event happened, so I was not able to do it. Now I am planning to start this project in the second semester, so that will be in February. And the session or my talk, which entitled as Ensuring the Content and Construct Validity of Assessment through TOS. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, I am Bernadette A. Condes from Senior High School English.